I'm Kevin Young. It's my honor this afternoon to introduce Rita Dove, who's the last reader in this, the 11th season, I believe it is, of the Danowski Poetry Library reading series. Before I introduce her, I'd like to thank some of the organizations that helped make this possible, namely the Hightower Family Fund, the newly named Rose Library, Emory's Creative Writing Department, and Emory Libraries. There are too many individuals to thank at length, but I do want to thank everyone behind the scenes at the library, at the Creative Writing Department, and at the Schwartz Center for helping all this come together. Please give them and all our sponsors a round of applause. Especially the sound team, thank you. We've been fortunate enough to have been here before. 9 years ago to the day, Rita Dove first read as part of the Danowski Poetry Library reading series. Since then, and we were trying to count that last night and this weekend, we think Dove has come to Emory to read or present at least 4 more times, including her getting an honorary degree and giving the commencement speech at Emory in 2013. Ours is one of just 25 of her honorary degrees, but we think it's the best one. On this Oscar Sunday, a day of movies, certain movies being honored, it is an honor to listen to Rita Dove read. And not just because of her many awards and honors, which include a National Humanities Medal and a National Medal of Art, or with On the Bus with Rosa Parks being named a New York Times Notable Book of the Year and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, or her third book, Thomas and Beulah, winning the 1987 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. It is an honor for me personally because it is not an exaggeration to say that Thomas and Beulah was the book that taught me to write poetry. I recall being a young poet, though I think I wouldn't have called myself that, merely a student in Kansas. And though I lived there in that long landlocked state, it was landlocked in all senses, I wrote poems mainly about the sea. I recall seeing in Essence magazine a notice of her winning the 1987 prize and going to the bookstore, which was really like a cigar store with some books in it. I think it was either a B. Dalton or was it the Town Crier, and setting about ordering her book. I frankly didn't understand why no one had come to my house and told me that they had given the first Pulitzer Prize in poetry to a black writer since Gwendolyn Brooks, which was about 35 years earlier. And what a writer. As I've said many times, Thomas and Beulah let me know I could write about my family as a topic for poetry and help confirm the things I'd only suspected, that poetry was not about the far-off majestic sea, but instead was the mud, the dirt. Poetry was the wheat and the wide sky, the food and faith and falterings, the luck and losses of my Louisiana family. I had never seen my grandparents in a book before, and here, in lines brilliant and bold, yet absolutely matter of fact, was a poet saying, "This is history, and this is my family," and that the two were almost the same. Here's the end of a poem from Thomas and Beulah called The Zeppelin Factory. It's from Thomas's section of the book. And the book, as you know, tells 2 sides of a marriage over many years. The Zeppelin Factory. That spring, the 3rd largest airship was dubbed the biggest joke in town, though they all turned out for the launch. Wind caught. The Akron floated out of control, 3 men in tow. One dropped to safety. One hung on, but the third, muscles and adrenaline failing, fell clawing 600 feet. Thomas at night in the vacant lot. Here I am, intact and faint-hearted. Thomas hiding his heart with his hat at the football game, eyeing the Goodyear blimp overhead. Big boy, I know you're in there. How could you not go home and write after that? The poem, like all the poems in the book, literally gave me heart, even as it described feeling faint of heart and hidden. It knew that courage sometimes meant holding on, something its enjambed lines also knew and enacted. The book also told of a long marriage and the work of love, giving us different perspectives on the same events. The results felt cinematic and soaring. I went and read everything I could after that, from her earlier debut, Yellow House on the Corner, and the enchanting second book, Museum. I still recall seeing her book, Grace Notes, which came after Thomas of Beulah, in the window of the famed poetry bookstore, The Grolier, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where one could find such things. They didn't sell cigars either. And buying it in hardcover. And I found that book today. And it's one of the few I have on my shelf of Dove that isn't signed, so hopefully I'll fix that. Dove is still one of those few poets I rushed to get in hardcover right away. Another is our own Natasha Trethewey. I threatened to tell the story backstage, so I think I'll tell it, which is that the other thing I did is I went to the very same Grolier and I saw that Rita Dove was coming with a number of other poets. In my mind, I think it was a benefit for Oxfam, and or Amnesty International, actually. And I thought, well, I have to go see it, and for $25 you could go backstage and meet the poets. So I was a student, so I saved my $25 and paid and got to go backstage and meet her in the way that one meets someone in a giant room full of people. But it was such a moving thing for me, and I think I found the Thomas and Beulah that I had her sign then, and she was even gracious then to me, a young writer who didn't know quite yet he was a writer, but knew he wanted to be in that audience and then maybe sneak a peek backstage. So it's incredibly moving to be backstage just as a matter of course. Anyway, so Dove would go on to serve as U.S. Poet Laureate from 1993 to 1995, the youngest ever to hold that position, and as Poet Laureate of Virginia from 2004 to 2006, and continued to publish works that engaged history, her own and all of ours, such as in On the Bus with Rosa Parks from 1999, and her latest, Sonata Melodica, a sprawling, songing book about black musician George Bridgetower, friend of Beethoven, and later Beethoven's romantic and musical rival. She also managed to dance, publishing American Smooth in 2004, using her love of ballroom dancing to craft an idea, as the title implies, not just about poetry, but about America. Her skillful sonnet sequence, Mother Love from 20 years ago, is another of my favorites, managing in 14 lines to capture the mother-daughter relationship, which has its own, shall we say, opera, cast in the myth of Persephone and Demeter. It becomes clear looking back over her work, as we will with her collected poems, 1974 to 2004, which is forthcoming this May, that her work is about intimacy, whether between couples, daughters and mothers, husbands and wives, or between justice and history itself. We are all intertwined, her work suggests, are not so much one as we are many, but with one heart, sometimes hidden. Showing us the hidden small moments as large ones, and the large moments, not giving up a seat on a bus, say, or seeing in a painting one's own face, are ours to make and make use of. Quote, "It's your baby now," she writes in Sonata. "Go on, nestle it, bruise it, make it sing." Ladies and gentlemen, the tremendous Rita Dove.
Wow. Thank you, Kevin. Wow. I don't know if I can live up to that. It was really, I love the anecdote. And I remember that afternoon for Amnesty International. And I remember all of my times here. And I keep coming back because this is a family of poetry lovers, lovers of intimacy between strangers and among friends that I keep coming back to. You nourish me. Thank you. Thank you for coming. It is a glorious day out there. But this is Atlanta, so there'll be more glorious days. And I'll bring some sunshine, hopefully, in here, too. I thought what I would do, as Kevin mentioned, I am, my collected, or 30 years worth of poetry collected is coming out in May, and so I have been going through author's proofs, which is a kind of a hell in itself. But it did remind me of this journey when I was, like Kevin, a young writer who didn't know which road to go, or if there was another one that had to be made. And so I thought what I'd do today, because many of you heard me read several times, and some of you have not, that I'd give you a little taste through the years. When I talk with my students, I tell them, if you love a writer's work and you love the latest release, then if you truly love it, you go back to the beginning and you read everything, because you want to see how they became that writer. And it was actually a lesson for me to go back and read some of these poems again. I realized with my first book, Yellow House on the Corner, that there were two things which were true inspirations for me, and they were, you would think, very dissimilar to one another. One of them was math and science part of my family, because my father was a scientist, and I loved science, actually. I thought that it had its own grace and imagination. And the other was the more expected thing, which was literature, Shakespeare. So at the same time that my father would do things like pull out a slide rule and show us 3 different ways to solve a simple, equation, I also was reading Shakespeare and seeing how he could hit all the notes of the human scale of an emotion, from farce to high tragedy. The one piece of math that confounded me was geometry, because there were no simple answers. It required imagination. You had to imagine a point that had no dimension, or a line that went on forever. And when I hit geometry in 8th grade, 9th grade, my brother simply, he's 2 years ahead of me, said, you just have to sit down until you can figure it out. And I thought, thanks a lot, brother. That's what big brothers are for. And so he did lend me his room and his desk, and so I sat there, and I realized that if you sit in a room and you look at the point where the ceiling meets the wall, it forms a line, but you can't see the line forever. It extends into the next room, but you can't see it. You know it's there. But if you can imagine that it's there, you can imagine that it continues. And at that moment, that's when geometry became poetry. Geometry. I prove a theorem, and the house expands. The windows jerk free to hover near the ceiling. The ceiling floats away with a sigh. As the walls clear themselves of everything but transparency, the scent of carnations leaves with them. I am out in the open, and above the windows have hinged into butterflies, sunlight glinting where they've intersected. They are going to some point, true and unproven. So that was the way that math took off. But then there was Shakespeare. And Shakespeare seemed to me like your very best friend, and at the same time, the God who kind of comes down from heaven, and you, all at the same time. It was years later when Shakespeare met me in a different way. And it was thanks to a blues singer by the name of Champion Jack Dupree, who was touring Europe at that time, and I was older, I had a book out. I was a young poet on the continent, so to speak. And I went to hear him play. I was surprised that he was there. It was in Germany. And he was playing in a little teeny basement room of a bar. He did 3 sets. The audience knew that he was a blues singer, but they, didn't quite get it, but they thought this was pretty cool. And he had this running little patter. Instead of saying Confucius say, he would say Shakespeare say. So Shakespeare came back. Shakespeare say, he drums the piano wood, crowing. Champion Jack in love and in debt, in a tan walking suit with a flag on the pocket, with a red eye for women, with a diamond-studded ear, with sand and a mouthful of mush. Poor me, I keep on drifting like a ship out on the sea. That afternoon, 2 students from the Academy showed him the town. Munich was misbehaving, whipping his ass to ice while his shoes soaked through. His guides pointed at a clock in a blue-tiled house. And tonight, every song he sings is written by Shakespeare and his mother-in-law. I love you, baby, but it don't mean a goddamn thing. In trouble with every woman he's ever known, all of them ugly, skinny legs, sly gap waiting behind the lips to suck him in. Going down slow, crooning, Shakespeare say, man must be careful what he kiss when he drunk. Going down for the 3rd set past the stragglers at the bar, the bourbon in his hand, some bitch's cold, wet heart. The whole joint stinking on beer. In love and winning now, so even the mistakes sound like jazz. Poor me, moaning so no one hears. My home's in Louisiana, my voice is wrong. I'm broke and can't hold my piss. My mother told me there'd be days like this. Thank you. Thank you. The blues will find you wherever you go. This is blues of a different order, unfortunately. This is I guess you could say, the root of some blues. While I was on the continent, as this young poet trying to be on the continent, I ran across a book that was a picture book. I mean, not a picture book, but it was a photography book. And it had a single title. It was in German, Petersilie, which means parsley. It was not among the cookbooks. And I could not figure out why it was there. And so as soon as I had a chance, I went over to that section and read and saw this incredible photojournalistic book which dealt with the massacre of 20,000 Haitian cane workers in 1937, which was conducted by Rafael Trujillo, the general and dictator at the time. And it was called Parsley because he had asked each of them, and I think many of you know this story, to pronounce the Spanish word for parsley, perejil. Those who could roll their R's were from Dominican origin. Those who could not, and it came out as an L, as a perejil, spoke of French Creole and could not and did not roll their R's. So this was his very creative shibboleth. This poem is in 2 parts, and each part has a title. Parsley, the cane fields. There is a parrot imitating spring in the palace, its feathers parsley green. Out of the swamp the cane appears to haunt us, and we cut it down. The general searches for a word. He is all the world there is. Like a parrot imitating spring, we lie down screaming as rain punches through and we come up green. We cannot speak an R. Out of the swamp the cane appears, and then the mountain we call in whispers, Catalina. The children gnaw their teeth to arrowheads. There is a parrot imitating spring. El General has found his word, perejil. Who says it lives. He laughs, teeth shining out of the swamp. The cane appears in our dreams, lashed by wind and streaming, and we lie down. For every drop of blood, there is a parrot imitating spring. Out of the swamp, the cane appears. The palace. The word the general's chosen is parsley. It is fall when thoughts turn to love and death. The general thinks of his mother, how she died in the fall, and he planted her walking cane at the grave, and it flowered, each spring stolidly forming 4-star blossoms. The general pulls on his boots. He stomps to her room in the palace, the one without curtains, the one with a parrot and a brass ring. As he paces, he wonders, who can I kill today? And for a moment, the little knot of screams is still. The parrot, who has traveled all the way from Australia in an ivory cage, is coy as a widow practicing spring. Ever since the morning his mother collapsed in the kitchen while baking skull-shaped candies for the Day of the Dead, the general has hated sweets. He orders pastries brought up for the bird. They arrive dusted with sugar on a bed of lace. The knot in his throat starts to twitch. He sees his boots the first day in battle splashed with mud and urine as a soldier falls at his feet, amazed. How stupid he looked at the sound of artillery. I never thought it would sing, the soldier said, and died. Now the general sees the fields of sugar cane lashed by rain and streaming. He sees his mother's smile, the teeth gnawed to arrowheads. He hears the Haitians sing without R's as they swing the great machetes. Catalina, they sing, Catalina, mi madre, mi amor muerte. God knows his mother was no stupid woman. She could roll an R like a queen. Even a parrot can roll an R. In the bare room, the bright feathers arch in a parody of greenery as the last pale crumbs disappear under the blackened tongue. Someone calls out his name in a voice so like his mother's. A startled tear splashes the tip of his right boot. My mother, my love in death. The general remembers the tiny green sprigs men of his village wore in their capes to honor the birth of a son. He will order many this time to be killed for a single beautiful word. That poem really haunted me because I needed to get inside of the head of evil, and I did not want to go there. And yet, if we cannot admit that evil is, in fact, creative and sometimes banal, and among us every day, and is human, then we will continually be surprised and overwhelmed by it. It was a lesson that helped me in the writing of Thomas and Beulah, and I really, really appreciated Kevin talking about Thomas and Beulah. I felt when I was writing it that the world would eviscerate me as soon as I published it, because I thought, I know these lives are important, that every life is important, but, well, the publishing industry thinks that every life is important. And it was really, I felt that my grandmother would have just, been very happy to have read that book, and my grandfather. I'd like to read you two poems from Thomas and Beulah. It's difficult because, as Kevin said, it tells both sides of a marriage. And I could get carried away and we'd be here all evening and you'd miss the Oscars and that wouldn't be good. And I was going to read another one from Thomas and Beulah, but Kevin had read very, very eloquently, I think, the ending of the Zeppelin Factory, and I suddenly thought I should read this one. This one is called Under the Viaduct, 1932, and I will fill you in very briefly just to say that this is from Thomas's side of the story. 1932, Great Depression, and where my grandparents came from, which was Akron, Ohio, it was a factory town, happened to specialize in rubber and Zeppelins, but there are many factory towns all over the world. At that particular time, the fact that the rich had become poor was, for the poor, I wouldn't say schadenfreude. I would just simply say that they say, you see. And at this point, Thomas has been looking for work, as everyone has, but stops because of a suicide. Under the Viaduct, 1932. He avoided the empty mill yards, the households towering next to the curb. It was dark where he walked, although above him the traffic was hissing. He poked a trail in the mud with his tin-capped stick. If he had a son this time, he would teach him how to step between his family and the police, the mob bellowing as a kettle of communal soup spilled over a gray bank of clothes. The pavement wobbled, loosened by rain. He liked it down here, where the luck of the mighty had tumbled. Black suit and collarbone. He could smell the worms stirring in their holes. He could watch the white sheet settle while all across the North Hill Viaduct, tires slithered to a halt. It's a myth that that even happily married couples share everything together. I realized that there were moments on both sides of that equation which were absolutely private, that the other person would not know. And this is a moment in Beulah's life. She is a young mother. My mother told me that whenever she wanted to escape us, the kids, that she would just go and sit in the car, in the garage, and we were wondering where she was. I'd just sit there, just calmly for, 10, 15 minutes, and she'd come back. This is Beulah's refuge. Daystar. She wanted a little room for thinking, but she saw diapers steaming on the line, a doll slumped behind the door. So she lugged a chair behind the garage to sit out the children's naps. Sometimes there were things to watch: the pinched armor of a vanished cricket, a floating maple leaf. Other days she stared until she was assured when she closed her eyes she'd see only her own vivid blood. She had an hour at best before Liza appeared pouting from the top of the stairs. And just what was Mother doing out back with the field mice? Why, building a palace. Later that night, when Thomas rolled over and lurched into her, she would open her eyes and think of the place that was hers for an hour, where she was nothing, pure nothing, in the middle of the day. I'm going to go to this one. I love color, and all of my poems have their own private color for me, you know. So all of my little tags are different colors, and I don't feel like the orange one right now, so I'm going to go to this one. Our daughter is 33 now. I can't believe that. And this poem was a poem that I had to negotiate with her because when she was very, very young, my husband is German, you know, and so she's mixed race, and when she was very young, I could read this poem without any problem. And then when she started going to school, I asked her, I said, you know, she used to love the poem, and then she got embarrassed by it. And I said, it's your call. I won't read it if you don't want me to. And so we hit this agreement. She said, within a 50-mile radius, if you appear, don't read this poem. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. And then really a few years ago, she said, you know, you can really read that poem again. It's all right, so. This is for Viva. It's called After Reading Mickey in the Night Kitchen for the Third Time Before Bed, with an epigraph from that great book that's in that book. I'm in the milk and the milk's in me. I'm Mickey. My daughter spreads her legs to find her vagina. Hairless, this mistaken bit of nomenclature is what a stranger cannot touch without her yelling. She demands to see mine, and momentarily we're a lopsided star among the spilled toys, my prodigious scallops exposed to her neat cameo. And yet the same glazed tunnel, layered sequences. She is 3. That makes this innocent. We're pink, she shrieks and bounds off. Every month she wants to know where it hurts and what the wrinkled string means between my legs. This is good blood, I say, but that's wrong too. How to tell her that it's what makes us, black mother, cream child, that we're in the pink and the pink's in us. Yeah. Canary. This is from Michael S. Harper. Billie Holiday's burned voice had as many shadows as lights, a mournful candelabra against a sleek piano, the gardenia, her signature under that ruined face. Now you're cooking, drummer to bass, magic spoon, magic needle. Take all day if you have to, with your mirror and your bracelet of song. Fact is, the invention of women under siege has been to sharpen love in the service of myth. If you can't be free, be a mystery. The next book, I'm proceeding chronologically, so I'm kind of growing up before you. It feels like that. The next book was Mother Love, and Mother Love is a book, as Kevin had mentioned, based on loosely based or reflecting on the story of Persephone. And I wanted to lift it out of the myth, or shall I say, dive so deep into the myth that it becomes everyday. So this poem is one that I rarely read because the book is composed of sonnets. This is a string of sonnets. This is 5 sonnets, actually, kind of put together. Because it's a contemporary version of the story of Demeter and Persephone. As you know, Demeter mourned her daughter because she was kidnapped by the god of the underworld, but then she comes back, right, for spring and summer. I always thought there was more to that story than a mere than a kidnapping. And in this poem, the daughter is in Paris as a lover of a mediocre artist, which is hell as far as I'm concerned, as a mother. And the mother is meeting her daughter. It's called The Bistro Sticks, told by the mother. She was thinner, with a mannered gauntness as she paused just inside the double glass doors to survey the room, silvery cape billowing dramatically behind her. What's this? I thought, lifting a hand until she nodded and started across the parquet. That's when I saw she was dressed all in gray, from a kittenish cashmere skirt and cowl down to the graphite signature of her shoes. Sorry I'm late, she panted, though she wasn't, sliding into the chair, her cape tossed off in a shudder of brushed steel. We kissed. Then I leaned back to peruse my blighted child, this wary aristocratic mole. How's business? I asked, and hazarded a motherly smile to keep from crying out, are you content to conduct your life as a cliché? And what's worse, an anachronism, the brooding artist's demi-monde? Near the Rue Princesse, they had opened a Galerie cum souvenir shop which featured fuzzy off-color Monets next to his acrylics, no doubt, plus bearded African drums and the occasional miniature gargoyle from Notre Dame the great artist had carved at breakfast with a pocket knife. Tourists love us. The Parisians, of course, she blushed, are amused, though not without a certain admiration. The Chateaubriand arrived on a bone-white plate, smug and absolute in its fragrant crust, a black plug steaming like the heart plucked from the chest of a worthy enemy. One touch with her fork sent pink juices streaming. Admiration for what? Wine, a bloody Pinot Noir, brought color to her cheeks. Why, the aplomb with which we've managed to support our art, meaning he'd convinced her to pose nude for his appalling canvases, faintly futuristic landscapes strewn with car wrecks and bodies being chewed by rabid cocker spaniels. I'd like to come by the studio, I ventured, and see the new stuff. Yes, if you wish. A delicate rebuff before the warning, he dresses all in black now. Me, he drapes in blues and carmine, and though I think it's kind of cute, in company, I tend toward more muted shades. She paused and had the grace to drop her eyes. She did look ravishing, spookily insubstantial, a lipstick ghost on tissue, or as if one stood on a fifth-floor terrace peering through a fringe of rain at Paris's dreaming chimney pots, each sooty issue wobbling skyward in an ecstatic oracular spiral. And he never thinks of food. I wish I didn't have to plead with him to eat. Fruit and cheese appeared, arrayed on leaf green dishes. I stuck with café crème. This camembert so ripe, she joked, it's practically grown hair, mucking a golden glob complete with parsley sprig onto a heel of bread. Nothing seemed to fill her up. She swallowed, sliced into a pear, speared each tear-shaped lavalier, and popped the dripping mess into her pretty mouth. Nowhere the bright tufted fields, weighted vines, and sun poured down out of the south. But are you happy? Fearing, I whispered it quickly. What? You know, Mother, she bit into the starry rose of a fig. One really should try the fruit here. I've lost her, I thought, and called for the bill. Sometimes they come back, though. I did. Dawn Revisited. Imagine you wake up with a second chance. The blue jay hawks his pretty wares, and the oak still stands spreading glorious shade. If you don't look back, the future never happens. How good to rise in sunlight, in the prodigal smell of biscuits, eggs, and sausage on the grill. The whole sky is yours to write on, blown open to a blank page. Come on, shake a leg. You'll never know who's down there frying those eggs if you don't get up and see. That is from a book called On the Bus with Rosa Parks, and the title came actually from my daughter, who we were at an event, and when she was young, we tried to take her everywhere with us, and she could do her own work and whatever, but just to go and be there. And we happened to be at an event where Rosa Parks was at the same event, and we were being bused from venue to venue. And of course, we got on the bus, and Rosa Parks was sitting in the front. And we went to the back, and our daughter leaned over and said, "We're on the bus with Rosa Parks." And it was perfectly iambic, a line, and I just wrote it down. But there were many other women, of course, who refused to give up their seat and had been taken into custody. The NAACP and the people who were responsible for really pushing through Rosa Parks' entrance into the press, were very careful about who they decided to make that test case with. This is a poem about one of the women, a young woman, who had been arrested before Rosa Parks. The enactment. Her name was Mary Ware, and she said, "I'm just a girl who people were mean to on a bus. I could have been anybody." Can't use no teenager, especially no poor black trash, no matter what her parents do to keep up a living. Can't use anyone without sense enough to bite their tongue. It's got to be a woman, someone of standing, preferably shy, preferably married. And she's got to know when the moment's right, stay polite though her shoulders aching, bus driver the same one threw her off 12 years before. Then all she's got to do is sit there quiet till the next moment finds her, and only then can she open her mouth to ask, "Why do you push us around?" And his answer, "I don't know, but the law is the law and you are under arrest." She must sit there and not smile as they enter to carry her off. She must know who to call, who will know whom else to call to bail her out. And only then can she stand up and exhale. Can she walk out the cell and down the jail steps into flash bulbs and her employer's white arms and go home and sit down in the seat we have prepared for her. I know that when Rosa Parks had to go to the courthouse 5 days after her arrest, and there was a huge crowd there, and a woman kind of yelled out of the audience, "Look at her. Ain't she sweet? Oh, they are in trouble now." Oh, that's the way to do it. As Kevin also mentioned, my husband and I do ballroom dancing, and the book American Smooth began with that love of ballroom dancing. One of the things that happens whenever you go to a showcase or a competition is that there are women selling those incredible dresses. Ah, those wonderful dresses. As one of my friends said, I never thought I'd be this old and be able to dress like a hooker and get away with it. It's a liberating feeling. I recommend it for everyone. Brown. Why, you look good in every color, the dress lady gurgled just before I stepped onto the parquet for a waltz. I demurred. We were in a country club, after all, and she, fresh from Fort Lauderdale, do people actually live there? With 5 duffel bags worth of ball gowns, enough tulle and fringe and pearls to float a small cotillion, was only trying to earn a living. For once, I was not the only black person in the room. 2 others, both male. I thought of Sambo. I thought a few other things, too, unmentionable here. Don't get me wrong. I've always loved my skin, the way it glows against citron and fuchsia, the difficult hues. But the difference I cause whenever I walk into a polite space is why I prefer grand entrances, especially with a waltz, that European constipated swoon. The dress in question was red. And speaking of grand entrances, since this is Oscar day or night, I really feel I have to read this poem in tribute to Hattie McDaniel, who, as many of you know, was the first African American to get an Oscar. She got it for her supporting role as a maid in Gone with the Wind. And in 1940, when the Oscars were being given out for in the movies the year beforehand, they had them at the Coconut Grove, and all of the nominees had to get out of their cars about a block and a half away and walk that gauntlet of admirers and also detractors. There were those who reviled Hattie McDaniel, saying that she shouldn't have played a maid, as if she had a choice. And those, of course, who recognized this as the milestone that it was. Hattie McDaniel arrives at the Coconut Grove late, in aqua and ermine, gardenia scaling her left sleeve in a spasm of scent, her gloves white, her smile chastened, purse giddy with stars and rhinestones clipped to her brilliantined hair, on her free arm that fine Negro, Mr. Wonderful Smith. It's the day that isn't, February 29th, at the end of the shortest month of the year, and the shittiest too, everywhere except Hollywood, California, where the maid can wear mink and still be a maid, bobbing her bandaged head and cursing the white folks under her breath as she smiles and shoos their silly daughters in from the night dew. What can she be thinking of, striding into the ballroom where no black face has ever showed itself except above a serving tray? High-hat Hattie, Mama Mac, her haughtiness, the little lady from Showboat whose name Bing forgot, Beulah and Bertha and Melina and Carrie and Violet and Cynthia and Fidelia, one half of the dark Barrymores. Dear Mammy, we can't help but hug you, crawl into your generous lap, tease you with arch innuendo so we can feel that much more wicked and youthful and sleek. But oh, what we forgot. The 4 husbands, the phantom pregnancy, your famous parties, your celebrated icebox cake. Your giggle above the red petticoats rustle, black girl and white girl walking hand in hand down the railroad tracks in Kansas City, 6 years old. The man who advised you, now that you were famous, to begin eliminating your more common acquaintances, and your reply catching him square in the eye. That's a good idea. I'll start right now by eliminating you. Is she or isn't she? 3 million dishes, a truckload of aprons and head rags later, and here you are, poised, between husbands and factions. No corset wide enough to hold you in, your huge face a dark moon split by that spontaneous smile, your trademark, your curse. No matter, Hattie. It's a long, beautiful walk into that flower-smothered standing ovation. So go on and make them wait. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Seems like we're back at the same space again as then. I'd like to read, the last time I was here, it was remarkable to read poetry exclusively. It was really a remarkable thing in this very theater. They played the Kreutzer Sonata, which was a sonata, the violin sonata that Beethoven had written, excuse me, and dedicated to a young mixed-race violinist by the name of George Bridgetower. And Bridgetower had premiered this, and yet we know it as a Kreutzer because of many things which are in this book. And I thought what I would do was read to you two poems, one from each of them, one from Beethoven and one from Bridgetower's point of view. Because Bridgetower, it's a remarkable story of this young prodigy who had been kind of concertizing all over Europe and wanting to meet the great composer because he was not being challenged enough. And their meeting was really quite pivotal. So what I will do is read you the poem right before Beethoven meets him. It's told from Beethoven's point of view. And then I will read you the poem right before Bridgetower, before Beethoven walks in the room. I don't leave it at that. This poem is called Ludwig van Beethoven's Return to Vienna. Now, Beethoven was in Vienna. He was being touted. He was a little bit wild. He did things, he didn't do things the way the Viennese wanted him to, but he was undoubtedly a remarkable and fiery and exciting composer. What they didn't know was that he was beginning to go deaf. This is 1802, 3, and the worst thing that could happen to a composer. He had been ordered into the countryside, and he's now trying to decide whether he's coming back. Ludwig van Beethoven's Return to Vienna. 3 miles from my adopted city lies a village where I came to peace. The world there was a calm place, even the great Danube no more than a pale ribbon tossed onto the landscape by a girl's careless hand. Into this stillness I had been ordered to recover. The hills were gold with late summer. My rooms were 2, plus a small kitchen situated upstairs in the back of a cottage at the end of the Herrengasse. From my window, I could see onto the courtyard where a linden tree twined skyward. Leafy umbilicus canted toward light, warped in the very act of yearning. And I would feed on the sun as if that alone would dismantle the silence around me. At first, I raged. Then music raged in me, rising so swiftly I could not write quickly enough to ease the roiling. I would stop to light a lamp, and whatever I'd missed, larks flying to nest, church bells, the shepherd's home toward evening song, rushed in, and I would rage again. I am by nature a conflagration. I would rather leap than sit and be looked at. So when my proud city spread her gypsy skirts, I re-entered, burning toward her greater, constant light. Call me rough, ill-tempered, slovenly. I tell you every tenderness I have ever known has been nothing but thwarted violence, an ache so permanent and deep the lightest touch awakens it. It is impossible to care enough. I have returned with a second symphony and 15 piano variations, which I've named Prometheus, after the rogue Titan, the half-a-god who knew the worst sin is to take what cannot be given back. I smile and bow, and the world is loud. And though I dare not lean in to shout, "Can't you see that I'm deaf?" I also cannot stop listening. So here is George Bridgetower, 10 years younger, quite a ladies' man. As many people will attest, Beethoven was very swarthy, and there are rumors. But they were almost of a complexion, shall we say. So here is Bridgetower waiting for Beethoven to appear. He's at a salon, a musical salon. First contact. Ignaz Schepanzig's apartments, a musical salon. I hear he's a wild man, a proletarian who forgets to shave and rejects tutelage, who will dare nobility to trespass wherever he decides to take his constitutionals, but at the keyboard, a wonder. So I am exactly where I need to be, tuning my instrument with Vienna's finest on a sun-blown April afternoon. I've made the rounds, baron to count to prince, had my letter of introduction passed on tray after tray like an after-dinner drink. It's all a bit dizzying, the lilting queries, coiffed heads bobbing and murmured goodwill. I watch late light soften the stucco into creamy arabesques as polite chatter swirls around me, whirls and dips until I feel I'm being slowly stirred by a celestial coffee spoon. At last, Schepanzig moves toward the foyer, maneuvering his gut past a mahogany secretaire and two nattering poufs to welcome, too late, his friend, who bursts into view, a squat invasionary force, not quite as dark as me, in coffee speak, a kleiner goldener, small gold, to my big brown, but pocked, burly, a dancing bear who refused to entertain, who'd ignore the yanked chain until they slit him for a coat. He's clapping shoulders now, shaking hands, moving forward as the room expands, laughing. And why not? This is his party, after all. We are here to play him, this ugly, flushed little man everyone calls the Moor, although not to his face, nor, I suspect, within my earshot. So I'll leave it to you to find out what happens when they meet. That's my only sales pitch. Where are we at? I would love to read a few new poems before we close the evening. It's always the new stuff that terrifies and engrosses the writer, and I think for the archivist, you know, they will gather the old books, and for the writer in us, it's always the stuff that's not even on the page yet. So I really want to share, this is where I am at the moment, a few things which are uncollected. And there's a very lovely broadside, however, which you'll find outside. I just saw it the other day, and it's so gorgeous. A poem of mine called "The Spring Cricket Considers the Question of Negritude." So I would like to read that poem for you, and then I'll read you one in response to that poem. The spring cricket considers the question of negritude. I was playing my tunes all by myself. I didn't know anyone else who could play along. Sure, the tunes were sad, but sweet too, and wouldn't come until the day gave out. You know that way the sky has of dangling her last bright wisps? That's when the ache would bloom inside until I couldn't wait. I knelt down to scrape myself clean and didn't care who heard. Then came the shouts and whistles, the roundup into jars, a clamber of legs. Now there were others, tumbled, clouded. I didn't know their names. We were a musical lantern. Children slept to our rasping sighs. And if now and then one of us shook free and sang as he climbed to the brim, he would always fall again, which made them laugh and clap their hands. At least then we knew what pleased them and where the brink was. The spring cricket repudiates his parable of negritude. Hell, we just climbed, reached the lip and fell back, slipped and started up again, climbed to be climbing, sang to be singing. It's just what we do. No one bothered to analyze our blues until everybody involved was strung out or dead. To solve everything that was happening while it was happening would have taken some serious opium. Seriously, all wisdom is afterthought, a sort of helpless relief. So don't go thinking none of this grief belongs to you. Even if you don't know how it feels to fall, you can get my drift. And I, who live it daily, have heard that perfect word enough to know just when to use it, as in, oh hell, hell no, no, this is hell. Always both sides. I just realized I'm doing this thing. I'm going to do this one because of the Oscars. Again. I am a late night person. I mean, when I say late night, I mean I stay up all night. But then I'll sleep. I really don't have insomnia, though this poem is called Insomnia Etiquette. But it's what everyone else imagines I have. But I just happen to stay up at night. Insomnia Etiquette. There's a movie on, so I watch it. The usual white people in love, distress, the usual tears. Good camera work, though, sunshine waxing the freckled curves of a pear, a clenched jaw. More tragedy, then. I get up for some scotch and Stilton. I don't turn on the lights. I like moving through the dark while the world sleeps on, serene as a stealth bomber nosing through clouds. Call it a preemptive strike, a precautionary measure so sadly necessary in these perilous times. I don't call it anything but greediness, the weird glee of finding my way without incident. I know tomorrow I will regret having the Stilton. I will regret not being able to find a book to get lost in, and all those years I could get lost in anything. Until then, it's just me and you, Brother Night, moonless, plunked down behind enemy lines with no maps, no matches. The woods deep. Cheers. It's a mean poem. I have been working on a group of poems which deal with the concept of ghetto, all the way back to the first mention of the word ghetto in 1516 in the most serene Republic of Venice, which is where the word comes from, get. And which goes to show you that, what goes around comes around, and there is, unfortunately, this is not new, what we are going through today. And so I will read, and I'm going to end with, I'm just trying to think. I'm going to read 3 poems, 2 of them from this series. The other one hasn't decided yet if it belongs to the series. But let me, maybe this one. Yeah, okay. Theresienstadt was a death camp during World War II and before, which was a quote-unquote model concentration camp. When I say model, what I mean is that it was the one that they would dress up whenever the Red Cross would come through to see if prisoners are being treated in any kind of humanitarian way. And so for a day or two, they would issue new clothes to the prisoners. Suddenly there was bread on the streets, in the marketplaces. They would have parades. There were quite a few of the Jewish musicians, composers, and artists were interned at Theresienstadt, and then were immediately after one of these grotesque Disneyland kind of showcases would then transferred on to the other ones. This poem is spoken by Alitza Herz-Sommer, who was a pianist, a woman who survived Theresienstadt. And it has an epigraph from Shakespeare: "If music be the food of love, play on." Transit. This is the house that music built. Each note of fingertips purchase, rung upon rung, laddering across the unspeakable world. As for those other shrill facades, rigged for a day porticos composed to soothe the regiments of eyes, guilt-reddened, lining the parade route, horn flash, woodwind wail. Well, let them cheer. I won't speak judgment on the black water passing for coffee, white water for soup. We supped instead each night on Chopin, hummed our grief-soaked lullabies to the rapture rippling through. Let it be said, while in the midst of horror, we fed on beauty. And that, my love, is what sustained us. I am not going to leave you on a downer, I promise this, but one more before we go up again, okay? This comes from a quartet of abauds. An abaud is a morning song. I usually see the morning on the tail end of it, but that's all right. This one, Abaud East, Harlem, AM. Today's the day, I can taste it. Got my gray sweats pouting in a breeze so soft, I feel like I'm still wrapped for sleeping as I head downtown in my undercover power suit, bitch sunlight fingering the spaced out tenements. This morning, there ain't nothing I can't do. This is my territory, I know all of it, 10 long blocks flanked by mighty water. Walking any avenue is like riding a cosmic surfboard on the biggest wave of the goddamn century, the East River twerking her bedazzled behind while sky spills coin like a luck-crazed Vegas granny flush at the slots. Today, I'm gonna make out like a bandit myself. Hook up with my buds to drop a few shots on the courts, ogle the ladies, then play the rest of the day as it comes. See where it goes. Feeling good, feeling good. Somewhere over the Hudson, the sun heading home. And there's an Abaud West, and there's a couple of others, but I would like to end with one that I'm not sure how it's fitting in there, but it is. I think it has to do with ogling those ladies that he was doing in his prescribed or circumscribed kingdom. It's a found sonnet. By that I mean it's really, everything in it is really a label that comes off of a wig package. I was totally stunned when I was going through some stuff with my sisters, and they were going to the salon and getting weaves and things like that. And I thought, these are just beautiful names. So this one is called Found Sonnet, The Wig. 100% human hair, natural, Yaqui synthetic, Brazilian blend, Malaysian Kanekalon, Peruvian virgin, pure Indian. Iron-friendly, heat-resistant, bounce, volume, featherweight, short and sassy, swirls and twirls, smooth and sleek and straight. Wet and wavy, future of fiber, weave a wig or shake and go. Classic, trendy, micro kink, frosted pixie, tight cornrow. Full 3/4, half, stretch cap, drawstring, ear tabs, combs. Chignon, headband, clip-in bangs, easy extensions, and ponytail domes. Long or bobbed, hand-tied, layered, deep twist bulk, pre-styled updo. Remy closure, Swiss lace front, invisible L part, J part, U. Feathered, fringed, extended neck, tousled, spiky, loose cascades, side-swept, flipped ends, corkscrews, spirals, Rasta dreads, Ghana braids. Passion wave, silk straight, faux mohawk, Nubian locks, noble curl. Cleopatra, vintage vixen, Empress, Hera, party girl. Thank you very much.